All right, you need anything from me? Because I'm going to be talking to myself. Okay. All right, welcome to This Is Here, episode 9. I am Adam Schechter, the school-based technology specialist, aka tech coach at John R. Lewis High School here in Springfield, Virginia, part of Fairfax County Public Schools. And I want to welcome everyone to the program. This is a little late in coming, but better late than never, I suppose, as they said in Ghostbusters 2 when the Titanic rolled in. Love that scene. But we do have a very special show. I have an interview I recorded with Margaret Sisler, who is the assistant principal at Brookfield Elementary and previously a high school, elementary school SBITS, as well as a classroom teacher. She also is part of the board of directors at VSTE, which is the Virginia Society for Technology in Education. And that is primarily the focus of this show, as back in December, I had the opportunity to go to the VSTE conference and I presented about podcasting. Maybe some of you who were at that presentation are listening now. That would be quite a small audience. But yeah, it was quite a different experience. I want to talk a little bit about what that was like as a presenter, what it was like as an attendee at some of the sessions that I attended, overall feel, and sort of a idea for those of you out there who've never had a conference experience, why they are very valuable. So let's get into it. So yes, back in, I guess over the summer, early fall, there were the application processes for VSTE. And as many of you know, any of you have listened to this show, I'm very active in creating podcasts and advocating for them as an educational tool, and have done a number of podcast projects and have led ESOL students or English classes, or just recently a world language class. We did a podcast in Spanish with students. Each of them has found it to be quite a rewarding experience. And so I set out to do a presentation that would introduce everybody to podcasting, sort of the technical requirements, the whys, the skills that are developed, as it was called Podcasting for Skill Development, which if you heard the previous episode where I was live from Roanoke, essentially, it's a terrible title. It really was. I have one next year already in mind. I kind of talk about it with Margaret. The presentation itself went pretty well. I scouted out the room ahead of time. It is like a ballroom that was subdivided into a bunch of presentation rooms. And I saw that I would have access to a table, a projector, and a bunch of seats. And so I know next year, if I was going to do something similar, that I would pursue what they call like alternative seating assignments. There was one room that I went to that had a presentation where there was a bunch of tables, everyone sat at one, and I felt like that would have been so much more conducive to what I wanted to try than the room that I was in. So no complaints to the VSTE organizers, of course. I think as a first-time presenter, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't really have a great concept of what that time would look like. And so now that I do, and now I have goals for next year, I certainly understand the adjustments that I want to make for next year in particular. But no, I mean, the conference itself was incredibly well organized. It was clear about what sessions were where, the directions were set. They had a whole bunch of accommodations for different mental health breaks and different things that you can check in on. The vendor display was great, and walking around and talking to some of the different vendors. Just the experience and being at the Hotel Roanoke, which is a very old hotel. It dates back to the mid 1800s, and I had a blast and was able to kick back and talk to some of my compadres from different schools and hear about their presentations, and also talk to people just around the whole state. So that was, the conference experience itself was great. But the presentation, I had like this idea in my head about getting people to start a podcast, but then wound up creating a presentation that was very talk-centric just sort of a transfer of information. It was pretty clear early on that I was biting off a little too much in what podcasting was. Like what I was trying to accomplish is probably something that would have been better over a series of presentations or something a little more bite-sized. Got that in the back of my head. So when I arrived there for the presentation, there was probably about 25 or so in attendance. It didn't really help that I was also at the same time as Catlin Tucker, who was the keynote speaker and also giving a blended learning presentation at the same time that I was giving my own presentation. So I could definitely see why my own session wouldn't be nearly as well attended. That's fine. So I wanted discussing like podcasting basics. I kind of talked a lot about, sort of the skills that it hits. I talked about the C's, if you will, of education, the collaborative nature of podcasts, kind of working as a team, creative and critical thinking that's involved in coming up with your concept, your scripts, assigning the roles, just the sort of creation process and why that was very important no matter what the subject was for podcasting. So I thought that was pretty successful. I went into a bit with equipment and sort of the different processes that you can to record podcasts. And I went and brought everything. I had 2 duffel bags worth of audio gear. Like I was setting up an entire mobile studio for an hour-long session. Like it was pretty nuts. And then I would actually repeat that mobile studio when I gave a virtual presentation, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Yeah, that was tough. I think for next year, unless I know that I'm going to be in like an alternative space where I'll have a lot of room for different gear, I might bring some things, maybe 1 bag, definitely not 2. Not really the most ideal of circumstances there. And so like kind of talking about the technical requirements, talking about like where we get the gear, it was pretty lecture heavy. And I think next year, if I'm going to do more of a hands-on podcasting presentation, I kind of have to add that space for people to explore and do their own sort of thing. And so attending certain sessions, it definitely varied. Some were more like presentation heavy. They were more like speaker focused, sharing their experiences. So there was one on like AI or adaptive technology and like it's interesting topics. And I certainly absorbed quite a bit, took some notes, gave me a lot to think about, but it wasn't necessarily anything that I was like having a hands-on experience with. Another session was about like sneaky professional development. And so as a instructional tech coach, like that's what I'm looking to do almost all the time is really sneak in with some of the professional development. A lot of times you go and talk about professional development teachers, sometimes you're met with eye rolls, sometimes you're met with resistance where you're like, oh, you're trying to change everything I do, or oh, everything I do is wrong, or you get a lot of apprehension. I actually had a experience with that recently where I started talking about an initiative that we're going to be doing here at Lewis High School. And it was like, oh, well, but everything I'm doing is fine. I was like, okay. So as a tech coach, like you kind of get that hesitancy, and your position is mostly about, in my view, making smaller changes or finding ways where you can adapt what you're currently doing so that's not a big shift. But then when you start seeing the rewards, it inspires you to want to do that more or to be more either tech integrated or just more like student choice and more like active learning sort of integrated in what you're doing. That's really what you're trying to do. But yeah, there was a cool session about like little sneaky things. My personal favorite is their potty PD, where you would put these little flyers that had like a little 1-pager document about like some quick tips or some other little thing that is something that you could sort of read and consume while also taking care of your other business, like something quick that you could refer to later, but at least like get you thinking while you're not really doing too much or otherwise disposed. And the coaches that were running that session also said that they put that near the copiers. Like they just put that within view just to give teachers something to think about as they're sort of taking care of other tasks. And they find that really useful. They said that the teachers in their buildings like it when it gets changed up and some things like that. So that's something I'm trying to do, as well as like a tech desserts kind of thing. Those are certainly ideas like long term I would like to pull off, I think. Been a little difficult lately. We've had a lot of things running through Lewis High School that I've been involved with. So trying to get that started has become a little bit difficult. But hey, in general, I thought it was a good experience. I had a lot of positive feedback, people in attendance, like I kind of talked to later, like we were like, oh, you're the podcast guy. Like I really enjoyed your like that sort of stuff I got, from some of the attendees there. So I do have some contact info and would be curious to reach out to them a little later on and say, oh, so have you done anything with podcasts there? Maybe, I don't know, kind of learn their experience. But yeah, like it was kind of cool, especially to reach out to those that were outside of Fairfax County. I don't really get to communicate with other educators like outside of the district. And sometimes even you're talking to teachers or you're talking to coaches from other schools in Fairfax. It's like you're walking into a different world, but to have people from like Stafford or Spotsylvania or somewhere else that is not quite the same boat as us and hear about like their struggles and things, that was kind of good. It was good to be in on that. So really enjoyed it. There was also a virtual presentation that I did. So when I initially got the acceptance for my session, I got 2 invites and I was very confused. And eventually it turned out that one of my sessions was going to be in person while the other one was virtual. And that was very weird. I think partly because like I felt like I was ready, but then also like I was doing other stuff. It was the last day of the conference. It was in the morning and I was like packing. I was like putting all my stuff in the car, except all the stuff I needed for my presentation. Because again, I was taking 40, 50 pounds of gear with me to this little virtual room. So it was a small room in the hotel where it was me, a relatively small table. There was a background. It was like an actual VSTE background, which is cool. It was like, oh, like one of those press conference backgrounds. And there was a VSTE sort of volunteer, a conference volunteer also in the room with you who ran the session. So it was over Zoom. And yeah, I set up all of my stuff. So I sounded great. And my laptop decided to die halfway through. So that was unfortunate, but recovered as quick as I could and got back to it. And again, it was kind of similar to the in-person one, but being that it was over Zoom, there was a lot of feeling that I was kind of like talking to the void. So you have to gear up and create your own energy and express your excitement over Zoom, which is sometimes difficult to do because you know that like in the room at the time, there's only like 10 or so people in there and they're here and they deserve to get my best. And so that's what I did. And generally, like, I didn't hear too much from it. Like some feedback you would get, of course, towards the end is like they throw a thank you, whatever in the chat and all of that. And the person that was helping me in the room was certainly complimentary and said, oh, that was very interesting. And like, I didn't know too much about podcasting, but you really educated me while I was sitting here listening and all that. Again, it was cool. Like it was just a cool experience to do. But one of the other things about the conference, I guess, is like as an attendee, and this is maybe something for those that want to go to conferences like this. What I liked about VSTE is that it was really about like technology integration, but it was also about like good instruction. Sort of seeing those models for like getting students to take their ownership of education, which I know is a big term these days. So that was invigorating professionally. It certainly made me want to go to the ISTE conference, the International Society, the big overarching organization. And given what we're doing in Fairfax County, we will be talking about ISTE quite a bit. At this time, I wanted to get to the interview with Margaret Sisler. So Margaret Sisler is an assistant principal at Brookfield Elementary here in Fairfax County. And as you will learn in the interview, she was very strategic about moving to an administrator role out of a tech coaching role and kind of the challenges and what that's brought on. So we had a very great conversation about VSTE as well, because she's a board member and helped plan the conference. So kind of talking about what educators get out of it and what the experience was like from an organizational point of view, as well as myself as a presenter and an attendee. So I hope you enjoy that conversation and let's get to it. All right, welcome back. I am joined with Margaret Sisler, who is the assistant principal at Brookfield Elementary and the previous SBITS at Westfields High School here in Fairfax County. Margaret, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I know. Okay, yes, I should know. Yes, it's very exciting just to be part of the show. See, I won't edit that out, but it'd be funny. All right. So, there's a lot of reasons why I wanted you to be part of the show. I think one of the fascinating things is to talk a little bit about VSTE, and I want to start with that because while you're an administrator now, you're still very much part of VSTE. And can you give us a little bit of what VSTE is, perhaps like what it stands for and how it benefits teachers?
Great. So one of the things I want to start with is kind of a little bit about my journey, if that's okay. I was an elementary teacher. I taught K-3 reading. I taught grades 4, 5, and 6 here in Fairfax for a number of years. And then I was an elementary SBITS and a high school SPITS at multiple schools. That led me to VSTE, really. When I first became an SPITS way back in 2010, actually here at Brookfield, I found VSTE, which is Virginia Society for Technology and Education, as a place where I could learn and connect with other educators that were also interested in how technology can benefit our learners, how we can use it to deepen learning, to really make authentic opportunities for our students to learn and create. I attended my first conference and I was hooked because here were people, these were my people. They were speaking my language. They were excited about a lot of the same things. And in the number of years since then, I think I attended my first one in 2013, maybe 2012 or 2013. In the years since then, I've seen the organization grow and evolve and really lean into not just technology, but education and what's best for our learners, really thinking about leadership, thinking about equity, thinking about AI was a big focus this year, and it was exciting to see what might be on the frontier. So, in a nutshell, I would say because I'm passionate about what's great for kids and what's great for learners, and that's what VSTE is for me.
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, my first conference was this year. I hadn't really tried to go before, the time commitment and all that kind of stuff. But for this year, I was like, I feel like I have something I can present. And so I presented about podcasting, or at least applied for it and got through. And I totally agree. Like just being around educators for 3 days who want to push, innovation in that student-centered way, I thought was one of the best things. And I really enjoyed connecting with those that have like the SBITS job, but in other counties. And I thought that was like a really big part of it, to kind of hear about similar struggles, but also some of the victories that they have had in spreading a lot of like technology integration.
It's fascinating to me how similar our experiences are, no matter how different our divisions are. A lot of times we have really small divisions that may only have one person who serves the whole division, or we have a small division that has 2 or 3 coaches that serve multiple schools. And their experiences say a lot to us and the privilege that we have to support one school with our whole soul. And also a lot that we can learn for how they manage that number of end users, really, to be able to really provide the best support that can help us when we're in great big schools like our high schools and still one person.
Definitely. Now, if you were like a classroom teacher or some other role in a school, what would be certainly some of the benefits that they could have from being part of a VSTE conference, even if they were just attending?
Oh, I would love for classroom teachers to attend. I would love for administrators to attend. The best thing I ever did was when we were when I was at Chantilly and we were launching into FCPS On, we took teams from each of our schools in the Chantilly pyramid, teams of teachers, administrators with our SBITs, and we attended together. That gave us an opportunity to talk, to plan together, to have some of the same learning experiences, have those shared experiences that we can talk about. I think what can happen from my perspective in a classroom, I was an innovative teacher, but it was hard to always be searching for things. What happened when I went to a conference or I attended some professional learning with people from beyond my school was I would get a seed of an idea that would blow up into an amazing lesson or a plan. And I think that's the power for classroom teachers. It's awesome if you can attend with a team from your school. If you can't, come on your own, you'll find your people there.
Yeah. And if you're able to negotiate a way to get there, I know it's like cost and everything is probably the biggest barrier, but VSTE compared to going to the ISTE conference, right? The big national, international conference. I mean, I've never been to one of those either. I think that's next on my bucket list.
I'd love to talk more about ISTE too. I've been to several of those and it's a whole new level of learning too. Being the International Society for Technology and Education. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Inspiring in a lot of ways.
Yes. My only, I think, experience was the virtual one they did a few years ago and got some stuff out of it. But being there, I thought was a whole different game because of what you're saying, the networking and who you can kind of talk to and connect with. And And presenting. I thought presenting to someone that's not in your district, or at least people in your school, that was a totally different experience.
I recommend everybody present because you have amazing ideas. I think we discount ourselves a lot. We think, oh, I'm not fancy enough. I'm not special enough. I'm not doing anything innovative enough. You are. You're doing great work with kids every day. Let's share that. And what might seem like everyday work for you is somebody else's innovation. Just like somebody else's innovation is the greatest thing you've ever seen, they might also be wondering if it's great enough to share. It really is what you have seen and haven't seen before. It's not about the caliber of innovation.
Mm. Yeah, that's actually something you kind of mentioned about, sometimes I think teachers don't realize what kind of leaders they really are and how much they could be instructional leaders just given the opportunity. I know over here, I'm going to probably do like a whole episode about share fairs and just how powerful they are, because we've had a few here that's just been fantastic. But so I guess if you're like a teacher or a coach and you're thinking, oh, I could probably present on something. I don't know how involved you've been with some of the presentation selections, but what might be a few tips for people that are like tossing that idea around?
So I would say find a buddy. It's always less scary when you're not by yourself. So ask a buddy in your school, talk to your coach. Coaches find a teacher. It's great to present together. That's the first thing I would say. And then I would say get clear on what you want people to know. Be really clear on those objectives. And then plan your presentation. Less is usually more because you're going to run out of time. You want to provide time for people to process. And just like with our classroom instruction, you don't have to be the stage on the stage. So design opportunities for people in the session to have conversation, to talk about what this looks like in their lens, in their world, in their role. What tools do they have that do this particular thing?
Yeah.
The last piece I would say is to think about, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Think about how to talk about instructional strategies that are not dependent on a particular tool. So I'm going to use your podcasting, for example. Podcasting is a great strategy to have students create and talk and process through their thoughts. And it doesn't matter what tool you use. You can use voice recorder on the computer. You can use an audio note, all the way up to really fancy software to edit and move all the things. What tool you use is not really the important part. It's the idea, the instructional strategy, and how you use that. So I would say think about that, because certain divisions allow certain devices, certain tools, certain software, certain subscriptions, and others don't. So really thinking about how it can be available to a broad audience is a key takeaway. After I presented at a bunch of different conferences, and that was something I learned pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I felt like, someone who hadn't presented before, and then afterwards, some of the immediate thoughts I had was like, I wanted to give more space and more room for some of the attendees to figure it out. I kind of wished I was in one room that had a lot of different tables set up around it. And I go, that's the one I really should have presented in, and not one that was just full of chairs. And so I'm like, okay. And like you're saying, like trying to do too much in like an hour, like I definitely overplanned and need to kind of simplify.
We do that as teachers in general. Like I think as educators, we always want to have more than enough, but also be ready on the fly to adjust and think about, if I can't get through this, I'm not going to just read all the slides and go quickly. I want to cut some things. So have a list in your mind or in your notes about what you're going to leave out if you're running short on time.
All right.
As far as what your space looks like, VSTE has done something the last couple of years that we're going to continue to do more of, which is flexible seating spaces. And so when you apply to present, one of the options is, do you want to use flexible seating for your presentation? And what that allows, not everyone has a space like that, because conference centers still set up equipment traditionally.
Yes.
We work really hard to get some flexible seating, some furniture that can be moved around, and to reset them after every session for what is needed for the next one. So our team is amazing at doing that. But checking that box allows you to be considered for that. And that might mean you have tables. That might mean you have seats that move around. That might mean you're up and moving your body kinesthetically as you're working through something in the classroom. They're gathering in four corners instead of in those chairs that are hooked together. So
Definitely.
that's another tip to consider. It kind of seems a little intimidating at first, but don't be scared. It's just like having furniture in your classroom that you move around.
Yes. And I didn't realize what that was, I think, through the application process. And then when I went and I saw what it was, I go, that's what I need next year.
Yep. Now you know.
I know, because I felt like for next year, I was thinking of like refining the podcast, and I was like, I'm just going to call it "You're Making a Podcast." That's going to be my session title next year.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I love it. I'm ready.
You ready? All right.
Here's another tip. As you say that title, one of the things I want to think about is, somebody told me this one time when I was presenting. I think I was at FETC, which is a conference in Florida that I attended a couple times. They alphabetize your presentation names. So if you want yours to be at the top of the list, think about letters. Think about starting your title with something A, B, or C. When you start with you for your
right.
Why, not you. I was thinking the word you, that came out funny. But when you start with you're going to be at the end of the list. Doesn't mean anything, but sometimes people don't always get all the way through. So they might find something really good and stop looking for that hour.
Actually, you're right. Because I know for VSTE, and I'm sure other conference schedules, the presentations per hour are somewhere in like 15 or 20 that you can choose from.
There's so many amazing opportunities. Man. Yeah.
You get lost real quick. So
okay. Can I share a strategy for that too when you're attending a conference?
Yes.
Here's what I do. So before the conference, I try to go through and star everything that I'm interested in the app that the schedule is on. I star everything that I'm interested in. Then when it's time to go to a session, I look at only the things that are starred. So during the day, I'm really only looking at my favorites in the app or in the schedule. And then from there, I make a decision based on where I am in my mindset, what I want to learn, and physically where I am. Can I get to the other building? Can I get to the bottom corner that's furthest away from me? And I make that decision on the fly. But ahead of time, sometimes even the night I arrive at the hotel, I go through each day and star all the things I'm possibly interested in.
Yeah, I found myself doing that right before, so that the day of, I was like, okay, I'm not going to get too
overwhelmed.
It's too much.
The other thing, I'm a real introvert. I don't know that people always know that. I pretend to be an extrovert in my professional life a lot, but I'm a real introvert. I get very exhausted, quickly overwhelmed with too many people and conversations and all the things. So with a conference, it's really important to take care of yourself, because you're no good if you're completely overwhelmed and depleted by the end of the first day. When I was first attending conferences, I didn't know that about myself well enough to do it. I was like, I have to attend a session every time. I need to be there. Tim Stommer, who is a former SBITS and former SBITS management person in Fairfax, told me once that the most learning often happens in the hallways between sessions at a conference. And that was a very permissive statement for me, that I could sit and have a conversation one-on-one with someone, and it was just as powerful as attending a session. And I could go back and process my thinking and come back out renewed and ready to learn again. And that was also okay.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know like the conferences themselves, I think, have been more attuned to those needs, because there was definitely at VSTE a lot of like self-care stations and areas. People were taking advantage of the massages. I know they were talking about that and all that. So definitely a lot of these.
I want to talk a little bit about my role in VSTE. I have been a board member now for, I'm finishing my third year of my term. Being on the VSTE board is a great opportunity to shape the direction of the work we do. That might look like working with the conference team, but it also can look like working on educational outreach and membership and the podcast. And we have our hands full with a lot of great work around the state. But I'm also part of the conference team, and that has been, I don't know. I looked this up. I think it was since 2017 I've been on the conference team, 2017 or 2018. And I love it so much. It's exhausting to put on a conference like this, a 3-day conference for between 800 and 1,200, depending on the year, educators from around the state. And we do everything from presentations. Committee takes all the applications, puts the schedule together. setting up the rooms, the projectors, tech support, social marketing, all the gifts and the swag. All of that is done by the conference team, and it's all volunteer. It's a great thing. And we come from lots of different backgrounds. A lot of us are tech coaches. There are folks who are in central office roles. All of I'm on there, and I'm an administrator, a building-based administrator. And so we come both with our professional and personal lenses. And I think every year that helps us make the conference a little bit better and a little more attuned to people's needs. Something that has come recently are the quiet spaces, the wellness spaces. Those have been the last couple of years really important as people are coming back together after our virtual year. And it's been exciting to see all the changes and how we can meet our conference attendees' needs.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who just sort of attended, obviously I presented, but like I felt really good. Like I felt really comfortable. I knew where I needed to be. The schedule was always very clear. You know, I mean, you can't do a lot about the space. I think sometimes you're like, oh, it's like this place was crowded. I guess my only notice was something like when you do the lunch, and then it was like, well, where are you gonna eat it? Find an empty room or just hang out. But that was also cool because then you would just be in some room and some random folks from around the state, and you just start, picking up some conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fascinating conversation with the sign language interpreters. Like that's just
fantastic.
They were just hanging out.
I am really excited about the accessibility parts of the conference that we implemented, and it's great. I think having folks be part of our conference for as many days as they're able to be part of is wonderful. So sometimes you might find yourself in a room with our keynote speakers and just have lunch and have conversations. That's happened to me multiple times at VSTE. It really is an incredible opportunity to connect across. Like, you're not just talking to people who are in the same job as you. I think we get sometimes stuck with that in our own division. Like, I get my professional learning with my people who are in my same job, and I don't ever have those other interactions around my division. But at VSTE, you have those. There are tech directors, there are assistant superintendents, there are principals and assistant principals, there are teachers, there are coaches, there are resource folks, there are coding specialists. It's amazing.
Yeah,
and I have lunch together.
Definitely. And actually, it was really great. I know for me, who is part of the media side of things, running the news show here and all that, is that people from Fairfax County IT. So some of the IT directors were here. So
yes.
I got to chew their ear off for a few days and hear about some of those different opportunities. And it was great for them to kind of see the learning from, I think, the instructional side, where they're used to seeing it just from like a technology, like they see the technology, but I think they get more of an idea of how it's implemented in the classroom by being there, what they could do. So all in all, a great experience. So where is it next year? Where will VSTE
next year we'll be in Virginia Beach. So every other year the conference is in Virginia Beach, and so it'll be exciting. So it's usually it's always the first full weekend in December. Next year the date is a little bit different. This year it was like the second, third, and fourth. It's a little bit later next year because of how the days fall. But we'll be in Virginia Beach. We meet at the convention center. We have a little more space at the convention center in Virginia Beach. Beautiful lighting. The boardwalk is decorated for Christmas. You can do a drive down the boardwalk and see the lights. It's lovely.
So it's great to have those kind of venues, right? I haven't been to Virginia Beach before, so I guess I'll put in next year. But yes. I know Hotel Roanoke was quite the spot. Like I was very, the historic building.
Lovely. There's a lot of history.
All the trees, all the Christmas trees they had decorated and all over the place. And of course, the candied bacon, that was
absolutely
super clutch.
In 2025, our conference will be in Northern Virginia. So it'll be the first time, it'll be our 40th anniversary. And it'll be a big doing. So it'll be a great opportunity for a lot of our Northern Virginia educators who might not have the opportunity to travel to Roanoke or Virginia Beach, but to give it a try. We're going to be at the National Convention Center out in Leesburg. So it'll be a lot of fun. It's a new location and a new venue for us, which presents a challenge to the conference, but an exciting opportunity too.
All right. And I think you heard it here first.
I don't know about first. It's not a secret, but
okay, fine. I didn't know. All right, fine. We heard it here. I try as I can to break news, right? You got to get the clicks, right? It's like Oh goodness. Well, that's awesome news. That'll help because that could be a conference I can commute to practically. So, or a short stay, or crash
Yeah.
in someone's place or whatever. All right, so that's 2025. I'll keep that little nugget. I was a little I wanted to go to ISTE this coming year because I was like, ooh, Denver in June sounds fantastic. But there were other things with a family trip that we wanted to do at the same time. So
I'm excited to go back to Denver in June. I went to ISTE there. I don't know what year it was. That all sort of runs together for me, what year it was, but I had a great time when we were in Denver the last time.
Yes.
It's a great convention center and location.
All right. Well, I won't be there for this year, but 2025 perhaps. That's a professional
where
goal.
ISTE 2025 is.
They're
labeled for where they are. So, and every few years it comes back to Philadelphia. So if you ever want a close one, Philadelphia is a closer. It's an easy train ride away.
It is. I like going places. So I don't know. Is it it looked like I think I saw for ISTE the proposal percentage in terms of what they approved. It was about like 30%. Like, is it really difficult to get an ISTE presentation through? Like, if you've done VSTE a few times, like, does that really set you up for ISTE, or there's more involved?
I think there is a more involved application. It's very similar in what they're looking for, but I think they get more. And so they have to sort through. I just think the acceptance rate is based on volume too. So I have presented at both. And I don't know, I've presented the sessions at VSTE and then taken them to ISTE as well. So that's kind of a nice thing. You can use one session, refine it each time, and present it again, which is kind of cool.
That'll be the goal.
I would say if you are new to presenting, consider a poster session. Do you know about poster sessions?
I missed the poster session this year. I think I was presenting at the time.
This is the best way. The first ISTE I went to, I presented with a friend at a poster session, and it's amazing. It's exhausting if you're an introvert, but it is the best way to do it. There are more of them accepted because a poster session is a lot like a science fair or a social studies fair. So a whole room is set up. At ISTE, it's a ballroom. At VSTE, it's a section of the atrium. And we set up a whole section of these spaces where every presenter gets a table with a monitor and like a cork board. So you can bring physical things to put on the board. You can present digitally on the monitor. And really, you stand there and talk with people and have intimate conversations about your topic. So you really get to connect one-on-one or one on a few and have the real deep conversations that ultimately end up changing practices. I can listen to a session all day in a group of 100 people sitting in a room, but if I can ask my particular question to a presenter, it's even more powerful because it means something to me. Poster sessions are the way to go if you are a first-time presenter.
Very cool. Yeah, I missed it this time. I really should have.
You could put in a poster session for ISTE for this, not this year because you can't go, but for next year.
Next year.
Yes.
We shall see. I'll have to give that some thought, kick all the ideas around. All right. Well, that's very exciting. Now, obviously, since we're in Virginia right now, but I know around the country there's like a VSTE equivalent usually in every state, right? Like that's.
ISTE is the national organization, and there are state affiliates. You can find a list of those on the ISTE website of all the state affiliates. They're not all named very similarly. We're just extra special. A lot of times they're named with something with a state name in it, but a totally different acronym.
Yes, I noticed that with the New York one because I was telling a friend of mine who works in New York. I was like, you should go check out the New York version of it. It's definitely not NISTE. Nope, definitely not. It's something far out.
It's great when you're, so I've served as a board member and attended and been able to be part of some of the networking where you get to connect with folks from other affiliates and hear what's going on in their state, what's going well, what's a struggle, and sharing information. It's been really fun. ISTE and ASCD, which is a leadership organization, merged last year, and we really in Virginia have been a model of how that relationship can work, as VSTE and VASCD, as if we don't have enough acronyms, have worked together tremendously on the power of coaching conferences. And in many other ways, we're building a strong relationship because we are really talking about education leadership and education. We're doing the same work. We're really focused on the same learning and leading and strategies. So it's really fun to see the alignment, and we get to share that with our other state affiliates. It's been really fun.
Awesome. All right, so I'll wrap up our conversation about VSTE. Just if you're, conferences, of course, is one way. What might be other ways that teachers can go and sort of access VSTE or some of the resources that they have out there?
So I would say check out our website. Make sure you're a VSTE member. Membership is free. You can sign up to be a VSTE member and get our newsletter regularly. Different committees are always looking for folks who are interested. We have a number of committees that you can also find on our webpage. I don't know if you release show notes, but I'll send you some links and we can add them in.
Of course. I will definitely add that. Yes.
There are often webinars. I don't know why I said seminars. Webinars. We're great at those now. I think they're accessible to everyone, and VSTE does a bunch of those. So that's a great way to be involved too. Our equity and diversity team has recently done some. The education committee is doing accessibility slams. They just had one last week, which is exciting. So there are going to be more of those coming too.
Yes. I learned a little more about, I know that we were doing adaptive and accessible sort of education work. I went to one of those sessions. I was not dragged there, but so Tim Brown, who's over at Fairfax High School, was just like, I'm going here. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So cool. I'll follow along. And was just interesting to see the different supports that are available and out there and how we can help, manage
I
that.
think something really important about accessibility to bring to the front is that these are strategies and tools that are good for all learners. And when we put them in place to help some learners access learning, we really benefit all. And so it's important work, and it's really exciting to see it getting attention this year.
Yes, very much so. All right. So I do want to change a little bit, change gears a bit and kind of talk about your journey. So I know when I first met you, you were working with FCPS On, which was our central office's support of one-to-one devices. And then you were like, nope, I'm going to go and be an SBITS over at Westfield. And now you're at Brookfield Elementary as an assistant principal. So if I may ask, what are some of the things that brought upon those changes, and how do you kind of approach each of those different roles?
That's a big question. So I became an SBITS because I really loved being innovative. So I actually became an SBITS in an elementary school. And after a few years, I had the opportunity to move to Chantilly High School, and that opened my eyes to this K-12 opportunity to really impact instruction. That is my passion. It is still my passion, and it's what I do every day in all of those roles. So I think that's the thread, is how do we make learning the best it can possibly be for all students? What do we want kids to know and do, and how can we help them have that opportunity? And that is the work in all of those roles. It doesn't matter whether it's with an elementary school, a high school. I went to central office for a bit and led that work with teams from all of the high schools and middle schools. As we brought devices into schools, we didn't want it to just be devices. We wanted it to be about the learning. So yes, I have to figure out the logistics of how do I get 2,700 devices out to kids on the first week of school. That's a little bit of a nightmare to figure out logistically. And we're going to work with our IT friends and figure that out. But the bigger question is, what are we going to do with those devices when they're in my classroom now? And why is this important? That's the big idea and question that suddenly I got to work on at all those different levels, and I still get to as an assistant principal. Now, I have some other responsibilities as well now, but I get to do that when I'm in my CLTs with my teams. I get to talk about instruction. I get to think about how are we making sure that everybody has the opportunity to do this and learn in this way. It's a lot of fun.
It is. And now, as an administrator, what might be some of the differences that you have in helping technology integration, helping sort of the instructional support when you also have an SBITS at your school and perhaps an instructional coach? Where do you sort of fit in with that?
So we're a team. We all share a part of this, and there's more than enough work to go around. I think that's a really important part of it. There are the day-to-day how-to team teaching, showing things that I don't always get to do anymore. I think I found my role as an administrator and an instructional leader, the instructional leadership part of the admin role is really with those CLT discussions and when I'm coaching teachers. So I really take the feedback when I do an observation and then we have the post-observation conversation. I really put my coaching hat on and I get to talk about what went well in that lesson. What do you think you did super and what part could we change? And then really thinking about the ideas that I can suggest there might have to do with technology. They might not. As an SBITS, the same thing could apply. I didn't always suggest the answer with technology. Sometimes we need sticky notes and paper and chart paper and markers, big kids and little kids. I want to use the best tool for the job. And so I get to ask those questions now when I'm coaching teachers or teams. And that's pretty exciting.
So then what might be the biggest, I think what's the biggest difference? Like what's the difference between sort of an SBITS coaching a teacher and now like an admin coaching a teacher?
So one big difference is I'm evaluative now. I do evaluations for teachers. When I was an SBITS, I was not. And that was a big part of my role. That was a huge part of why I could be so open with teachers and why teachers felt they could be so open with me. I really try to build that relationship with my teachers so we can still be open, but knowing there's a power dynamic that I have to respect. It's different as an SBITS when you say, oh, you should try X, Y, and Z. When your principal or your assistant principal says, oh, you should try X, Y, and Z, that feels very different than a coach or an SBIT saying it. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
I have to be really aware of that dynamic when I make those opportunity suggestions.
Definitely.
I think that's the biggest difference in the coaching.
Understood. I know. I just sent out, because we're having our meeting here next week. So I sent out to teachers like, oh yeah, SBITs want to go and hang out in your classes and go and poke around. They're not evaluative. Mm-hmm. They're not judging you.
I no longer have that caveat that I can throw on the bottom of everything. So that's a big difference.
Do you know though? I mean, yeah, we do talk a lot about like teacher evaluation in the future or like going in the future and what that's going to look like. I know with teacher burnout and everything else, there's like a lot of pressure. I don't know if that's something you feel.
I work really hard I think that everyone feels that naturally because of the power dynamics, because of it's tied to so many things. Like it is an important part of your professional growth. Mm. I try to work really hard to say this is to help you grow. It's not. So back in 2016, when we started FCPS on at Chantilly, we said it's not a problem. Like it's not a problem where you are. It's okay to be, let me get the sentence right now. It's been a minute. It's okay to be where you are. It's not okay to stay there. Growth is not a bad thing. Suggestions for growth are not a bad thing. That's a mindset that isn't always baked into everyone's evaluation process. And it's something I work really hard to try to communicate. I'm really new at this job. I've only been in it a little bit over a year, about 15 months now. I don't always get it right. Sometimes that power dynamic supersedes the relationship that I've tried to build, and that's hard. But I continue to work on that I'm not saying you're bad at something. I'm saying, have you considered there might be a different way? Or could we look at this way, which would meet the needs of our students better? Not that I have all the answers either. I think that's a really important part of the process too. I don't know. Can I answer the question? I feel like I'm talking around a lot.
No, it does. I know as someone who's been a coach, who's been like a mentor to others, I feel like kind of the approach that you're going for is leading more to growth instead of being like kind of that evaluative, like just go tell everybody what to do just because I said it kind of thing.
I try not. I don't embody an authoritarian style. I'm definitely not that. So at least I try not to be. There are times when it is what it is and we have to do what we have to do. But I try to do it alongside you. when that's the case. So I think that's a really important part of this. It's exciting to see shifts in instruction and to see kids learning and to see growth. I love that we get to celebrate that together.
Definitely. I think, I'm a little curious to see where things like our POG poll, man, I don't want to throw acronyms on them. There's that. What are they doing? They were recording a podcast at VSTE, and I know that the host, if someone was bringing up like jargon or something, would like ring the bell. And I sat in, and he didn't ring it once. It was, it was great. But we talk about like our portrait of a graduate, in Fairfax County. That's sort of the skills that we expect our graduates to have. And now they're going to do like presentations of learning is like the big push. So every year-ish. Yes. Are you guys working on that right now? How's that going?
We are. It's something we did. I got to focus on last year, which was really fun. We were part of the cohort that the county supported in doing this work. I did it with multiple grade levels last year. And to see kids talk, the whole idea is really about kids collecting evidence of their learning and talking about three things. They talk about, I grew, I can prove it, here's my evidence, and this is why it matters. And so I think it sounds intimidating when we call them presentations of learning. Really, it's a conversation. And it can be even a group conversation. But I'm using my evidence to support that. And so to sit with second graders and hear them talk about how they grew, for example, about making connections. In the beginning of the year, I made these connections and it helped me because I did this. And then look at this one. It's so much better because it's detailed. It's this. It's powerful. And those kids know that skill matters to them now. It's meaningful. And it's going to be something they do regularly now that they're third graders. It's really a lot of fun to see students find ownership of their learning in that way. Mm-hmm. It also gives kids a different way to shine. You don't have to be great at something, but you grew. You improved from here to here. My details were terrible in the beginning. I didn't include any details. It's funny how they're so honest about their self-reflection, and then they grew and now their story has details and they revised and made it more meaningful. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I've seen a few of those videos, and as someone who has never worked in elementary education, probably will not. That's definitely not my comfort zone. I do love being at the high school level, and middle school when I was teaching middle school, of course. But some of those videos with the second and third graders was just adorable about those sorts of things. And you go, well, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But I guess if you're a second and third grader, like that is a big deal to show growth about, okay, I didn't know any details. And then I was able to make a paragraph and have 2 or 3 details. It's like, that's big. And I guess as a young dad, a dad of a 4-year-old, I'm like, I'm going to watch her do that. And I can't wait. I see it now. I see it now.
I see it every day in our kiddos here. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's a lot of fun.
Yes. And then you have a 4-year-old who knows how to access the app store and download YouTube because I took off the app. And then she's like, nope, I'm taking it now.
Taking it back.
Oh, goodness gracious.
How did you learn this? Amazing.
How did you know this? I don't even know. Yeah, I know. I'm sure we can, maybe for another time, we can talk about assessment because that's some of the other groups and things that we're doing. And some of I know the grading piece and all of that is huge, but we'll save that for another time. It's a whole different conversation. But I do want to ask you this sort of as a closure. So what do you miss about being an SBITS as opposed to being an admin? What's something that now you're, that not like you're not enjoying what you're doing now, but something that you miss from before?
I think the thing I miss is our community and the collaboration that we had. I know that is something that I miss. As an administrator, my time is used differently than it was when I was an SBIT. I could schedule time to meet with a group of, we used to call them special interest groups a long time ago, but I could get together with a number of SBITs who were interested in something special that we could work on, figure out, and move forward on. It's very challenging to be away from my building as an administrator. It's just how the system works. There aren't subs. There isn't anybody else to pick up the slack other than the rest of my team. And that's a hard part of it. And I miss that collaboration. I am part of a cohort of new administrators, and I value that time tremendously because it's some of the only time that I get to be with other administrators who are new in the role and ask the conversations and the questions like, how do you do this in your school? How are you managing this? I'm completely overwhelmed by such and such. What are our strategies to get through it? I think our community of SBITs was powerful that way. And I was really excited. Our support circle when I left was strong, and I leaned on this group of folks that we saw in person and via email every day in my inbox. I don't even have time for that this time. I will text a few other APs and we get back as soon as we can. But when you're in the midst of all it's not just busyness. It's when you're in the work in this way, it's a lot harder to dedicate the brain space for those interests and the collaboration that we need.
Yeah. And there's always something. There's always some emergency, and that radio that you carry around is now your life.
Yeah, it's hard. And I'm lucky that I work in a school where my admin team is very collaborative. So I do get that here. But as an example, on certain days of the week, we attend our CLTs. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have CLTs, collaborative learning teams. I'm going to get the ding for the acronym there. So we attend our meetings. Well, we each support different grade levels. So we are like ships passing in the night with a high five as we go in and out of the coaches suite, with the teams. So I pop out for 1 hour and my co-AP pops in, and then we switch out. And it's hard. We don't even get a chance to connect much on those days. I think that is the hardest. We have to carve out that time. And because we value it, we do carve it out. So oftentimes we will sit down before, after school. We'll try to sneak in those minutes when we can. And I try really hard to be, I don't take for granted the professional learning opportunities that I have to connect with my other APs. Our region meetings, our all county assistant principals meetings. Those are really important for me.
Very good. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for being here, Margaret. Can people find you online still? Is that something that you're still doing not as much, or?
You can find me online. I'm on Twitter. I'm on X. I'm having a hard time with X. I'm not going to lie. I'm still on X as @TechieMargaret. You can still find me there. I am not nearly as social there as I used to be because I'm protecting my time a little bit differently these days. But reach out, connect with me. I would love to.
Very good. And we'll look forward to that. Also the links in the show notes about VSTE and everything else. And I don't call it Twitter. Well, no, I still call it Twitter myself. My phone icon still has the bird. It's like not.
I recently updated. And I will say I loved the education community we had on Twitter. It's not the same these days. And I think I have not figured out where everybody is, and everybody may be on different, there's Threads, there's Blue Sky, there's lots of different places. And I think that community is sort of split. So if anybody knows where the education committee is really or the education community is really hopping on social, reach out to me on X and tell me, because I'll head there.
Well, I won't tell you again. I won't tell you TikTok because I have like a whole bunch of other thoughts about TikTok teachers that I'm not going to get into right now. All right. Thanks again, Margaret.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. I want to thank Margaret Sisler for being our guest today on This Is Here. If you want to reach out, you can do so on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it now, at Lancer_EdTech, Lancer_EdTech. That's my professional Twitter account. You can also get to the show from @ThisIsHerePod. That's ThisIsHerePod. You could also send an email to thisisherepod@gmail.com. Again, thank you all for listening. We'll be back with another episode soon. So until then, see ya.